It would be best advised to not bring the war to his door. Here's a look at the Spero Animal Warriors of the Kingdom Primal Series General Thang. This mighty warrior leads the Chinari forces with his wife Mala, a kind and nurturing leader who cares deeply for his people and is a formidable warrior and tactician. Standing quite large and in charge, before we get a closer look at General Thang, let me send out a big thank you once again to the folks over at Spero Toys that were kind enough to provide the sample of the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom General Thang that we can have a look at. We have already looked at Kali, which we will be bringing in a second for comparison's sake. Though for General Thang, he's quite large again. He's about 8 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 20 centimeters tall. Two very different figures of two very different builds. We're going to slide over actually General Thang that we're about to have a look at and bring in the earlier looked at Kali. One thing I really wanted to say that as a compliment to the company, I think really Spero is really nailing when it comes to the paint. The color schemes though are different from one another, maybe have something to do with their tribe differences from one to the other as well. Kali going with more the gold and the vibrant blue. On the other hand though, General Thang is going with this very vibrant metallic pink. And unlike Kali, General Thang actually comes included with a secondary head portrait, something that the earlier emperor couldn't actually say that he had. Not only does he come included with an additional head, but the figure also has 2 additional pairs of hands. One pair of hands, in fact, were actually included already with the tray with Thang. These are these closed-fisted hands, nicely detailed, very well painted as well. These can be easily, I don't want to say easily, they can be swapped out from his forearms, though it did take a little bit of time and patience to actually remove the hands from their sockets. Then packaged inside of an orange baggie, the figure also comes included with these hands as well. May have something to do with the large war hammer that he wields, may also just do more for mauling hands, but either way the figure hands are nicely detailed. It looks to be as well, they took the time to even go in there and paint the individual fingernails. All these attentions to detail are things I certainly appreciate. Then let's talk a little bit about his war hammer. Get a good load of this. The hammer itself has been cast in what I'm guessing to be more of a dark gunmetal gray, and then they've painted the bands in blue with some additional brown in the middle there as well. This looks like it could inflict some serious damage, especially being wielded with a monkey this size. The gorilla can hold it in either one of his hands, though you will have to pry the fingers away from the palm in order to do this. I would always really recommend as well, and even on the packaging they said as well that if you're having any tough time with the joints, just heat them first before you start to move forward. That also can be applied as well when it comes to his hands. The hands themselves, the plastic is such of a good quality, I ended up having to heat the hands in hot water in order for the grip to get a little wider than what it is. Once the hand is of a grip wide enough, you can then take the warhammer and wedge it in place. The only thing, unfortunately, though, with the time that I've had now breaking in between, the plastic has now started to cool, so I'm going to have even a harder now time to get the warhammer in place. But it still, though, manages to get in between his grip. Just takes a little bit more persuading in order to do that. And boy, does that ever look nice to have the hammer in his hands. Now, because also with the size of his hands, you can also bring the warhammer across, and he would be able to wield it with both hands. Although, again, it's just going to involve me a little more prying to get these off. Speaking of which, prying, like I did say, though, earlier, the hands were really hard to actually get off. I had to really heat them first, and then even then, it took a lot of pressure and pulling to finally get the hands off. The hands then can be swapped out with any one of the hands that were already included with the figure. I'm just going to get the hand back in place here for a second. One of the other things that come included with the figure as well is this really interesting looking alternate portrait. I'm guessing this is now when Thang is going into battle leading his troops. Now you can see now he is adorned in this really interesting looking war helmet. The helmet itself is made of softer plastic, but you can see the way I'm prying it away from his face. But it does also give him a much angrier looking portrait that lends really well as well with the armor that he's had currently on his body. Now, one thing I did also discover about the armor of Thang is the fact it seems to be removable. So, for example, seeing as this hand was already removed anyways, you can take the hand off and you can slide the armor pieces off completely. That seems to be the case across the board. He's picking up his armor right now. It seems to be the case across the board. The only one I couldn't seem to move is this one right here. It may just be a case that's really tight around the plastic arms, or it may also be the case that it's adhered to the body. But it seems that be the case that you can remove the skirting. You can also as well remove the boots, or the guards in front of his legs. This was a lot harder for me to do. In fact, I couldn't even get the feet actually off, and that's even after heating them. But it seems to be the case that these are separate from what I can see, at least. So for all intents and purposes, I will imagine you'd be able to take them off. If you wanted to take off, say, this shoulder piece armor, first of all, let's actually go ahead and take the hammer and remove it from his hand, just because I know it's going to be getting in the way of things. Now, again, I would really say heat these with hot water. I mean, thank goodness there's this much clearance with only the handle in the middle. It's a lot actually easier to remove that. But it also seems as well like this can be removed. But if you wanted to say remove this piece, all you really need to do is just remove the head first, and then this whole entire part can slide over the socket. So if you wanted to have the figure displayed, for example, without it, one thing it does also give you a chance to see is the talented sculpting that they incorporated to the figure, where you can see some scarring very visibly on the front of Thane's chest. Personally, for me, I'd like the idea of more displaying him really with the armor myself. But if you did want to change the head out, say, from the more neutral expression, which we really didn't even get the chance to have a look at first, really well sculpted, again, really nicely painted there as well, the front of his face. He certainly seems a little kinder in this head sculpt versus the one that we're about to change him out for. Just let's put that back into the ball joint for right now, at least. Bringing the other alternate head sculpt so you can see the difference between the two. It may just also be the fact I just really like the use of this metallic blue. It isn't quite the same metallic blue that they used earlier for Kali. It seems to be definitely a lot more shinier, but it matches obviously the coloring that he has there on the gauntlet there, or the part that at least protects his forearm. So changing out the heads, we're just going to go ahead and pop the head off for right now. We're going to pop in and then the new head. For me, at least, I'm going to be displaying the figure, I feel, with this head sculpt instead, just because I think it's got a lot more personality going for it. It is a little harder, I will say, to get this back in place. The socket, for all intents and purposes, is the same size as the ball joint, but every single time you go to put the head back in place, what ultimately ends up happening is it ends up moving the ball joint. Realizing that the plastic may have cooled a little bit too much, I went back with the hairdryer once again and just heated the under socket of Thane's head before trying to attempt again to get the head back onto the ball joint. It involves a little less than exertion on your part to get the head properly in place, and once in place, it does look quite good. The thing I noticed, though, about this head sculpt, say, over this one, is that this one is a little bit more prone to popping off. It may have just something to do with the fact I don't have the head completely securely attached onto the ball joint, but even like moving his arms back and forth, especially like this one, moving his arm too far forward sometimes then ultimately pushes the shoulder pad armor right into his head, and that's one thing that pushes the head off. Again, I may be just a case that I don't have the head completely in place. Though with the head now in place, you really get a chance to kind of see the consistent colors, where now you've got that metallic salmon representing here, again, the armor that he has on his body. But again, like that really nice metallic blue that he's got in his helmet matches that of the the forearm guard, of course, and he's also got that in the knee pads. While we're still on the subject of his lower half, at least, you can see he's proportionally a lot bigger, obviously, in the top torso than he is in the lower half. Thane, for example, he has still the same range of motion, for example, as Kali from before, but just again, he's got smaller quarters to contend with. It's a little harder to kind of get in there, just because, again, like you're dealing with much smaller legs this time around. But again, like the detail work that they incorporate into this figure, it looks just as good from the front as it does to the back, and even the places that normally you could easily hide non-sculpted areas, like underneath his armor, for example. The fact that these all have to be removed, you'd know that they'd have to go in there and finish it, and every part of Thane looks, again, just as good as it does from the front. Now, the thing about the figure as well, when it comes to the articulation, he still more or less retains the same posability as the earlier looked at Kali. It's just, again, like you're dealing with a much larger body this time around. For the head, it's going to be on a ball joint, so it does move back and forth, but because, again, like the head is so close in quarters to his torso, it's a little harder to kind of move his head around. It moves up to about that high, it looks down about that low, and of course you can rock it back and forth. The thing, again, when it comes to this particular arm as well, moving it forward and back, sometimes if, again, you don't have the head completely attached onto the ball joint, this has happened to me a couple of times already. I think I've got it good okay this time, but moving it back and forth sometimes, and especially bringing his arm out, either the hand will fall off, like it's going to be doing just right about now, or the head is going to pop off. We want to make sure everything's kind of back in place. I know it's just simply a case where I don't have it completely securely attached, and again, I may have to just kind of heat the hand a little bit more to get that properly in place. This arm is fine and good. I mean, this arm's going to rotate all the way around. There's no hindrances necessarily by the fact that there's no armor. And again, while I'm rotating this, I don't know if you can actually tell this or not, but it seems to be almost a ratcheted joint that they've got in the shoulders. So it rotates quite securely. You can also as well bring the arm up. Now, even though he has very large shoulders and an equally large body, he still manages, I'm surprised to see, a pulled off 90-degree angle bend. Of course, the figure does have a bicep swivel, even though it's a much larger bicep this time around. And he also has just a single hinge in the elbow this time around. Hands do rotate back and forth. The figure does have an upper torso crunch. So again, you get that ratchet joint at play here. So it can bring the torso further forward this way. Or again, you can bring the torso back that way as well. You can rotate the waist back and forth. The legs do split in. Again, like this is going to be something that's going to be a little bit more limited just because, again, like the skirt's so close really to the knees. But the legs do split about that far out. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. There's a bend at the knee. It does allow, in theory as well, the lower leg to rotate as well back and forth. And again, the figure does also have foot articulation, both up and down this way. And you can also rock it back and forth this way as well. I interrupted myself with a train of thought. I love the look of General Thang. I mean, to be really also fair, too, just get the figure to stand here, I also was a big fan of Kali, too. It's really interesting to see two different complete takes on characters. Of course, you got the larger proportions here happening for General Thang, the more skinnier, leaner look for Kali, but really well executed by the folks over at Spero. If given really the choice between the two, I think my favorite, I would say, is General Thang. He's just got, again, a lot of cool character going on for him. I also really want to give him as well awarded points for the fact that the figure does also have an additional head, something that Kali, even though he really is a conquest leader, can't really say that he has himself. I really, again, like the way they've executed General Thang. The thing about, again, the armor, even though it is technically removable for all intensive purposes, from what I can see, again, you can remove it on the forearms, you can remove it, again, clearly on the shoulder pad, and it seems to also be the case that you can remove it on his lower half as well. I would ask really the question, I mean, underneath all that, you would imagine would just be a gorilla body. Why would you want to remove the armor? Why would you want to take off all the work and all the effort and all the great sculpting that Spero put into this piece in the first place? I say personally, and I'm not going to sway you, I hope, in any one direction, I would say personally leave on the armor because that's the best trait of General Thang here. Due to the obvious size and weight of General Thang, if you are looking to get this figure for yourself and you're worried about the stability of him, just know that while display stands aren't sadly included with the animal warriors of the kingdom, they are though using the same diameter sized peg hole in the undersides of their feet. Here we go. What does that mean? You can use a display stand from another figure company just to ensure some additional stability is on the bottom of Thang's feet. I've got the figure here in final looks displayed with Warhammer in both of his hands. Can be effectively done by using the hinging in his elbows. Even though it's only just one single hinge, he doesn't have the double hinge, for example, Kali that we looked at earlier, but the single hinge is more than enough to effectively have him holding the hammer in both his hands. And while it seems to be the case that you can remove the armor on General Thang, I personally prefer the look of having him more armored up. But it looks to be the case that, as you saw in this review, you can remove the shoulder, you can remove at least the forearm guards, and I would imagine the same rule applies as well for his lower half, even though I had a real hard time to actually remove his feet. The feet were one thing I just wanted to leave in place, because I'm sure it would be a harder time to then get his feet back in place. But it looks to be the case that you can remove his armor. I personally would just rather leave the armor on myself, but there's also that option if you prefer that look instead. Once again, though, a big thank you to the folks over at Spero that did provide this sample of the brand new Animal Warriors of the Kingdom Primal Series General Thang. What a fantastic figure this is. If you guys are interested to check out more from Spero, you can go to www.sperotoys.com. Don't worry. I'll also put it in the description down below in the video. Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you would like to stick around for more, while we have wrapped up things right now, at least for the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom, there's definitely going to be a lot more videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.